There is a version of this morning where I am not in it. It is a Tuesday in the spring of 2026, and the light is coming in low and yellow across my kitchen counter, and my son is sitting at the table in his socks, eating cereal too fast, the way he always does when the bus is close. He is 7, going on 8, and he has a cowlick that no amount of water will lie down, and he is telling me a very long story about a boy at school who can fold his tongue into a shape called a clover. I am only half listening, because I'm watching the milk he is about to knock over, and because there is a single sheet of paper held to my refrigerator by a yellow alphabet magnet in the shape of the letter C. The paper is a court order. It is not framed. It is just held there by a child's magnet, curling a little at the corner from the heat of the toaster, and most days I do not read it. But I know every line. It says that Cole Rourke resides primarily with his mother. It says that his mother is me. I pour his milk. I sign the reading log by the door. I find the other shoe, which is always under the couch. Always, as if the couch eats one shoe a day as rent. These are small and ordinary and holy things, and I do not take a single one of them for granted. Because there was a stretch of my life not long ago when a man with a good face and an expensive lawyer very nearly arranged for someone else to be the one pouring this milk, signing this log, finding this shoe, and for me to become a photograph in a box in a closet explained away to a growing boy with one sad sentence about a mother who had chosen to leave. I want you to understand how close I came to standing in a kitchen that was not this one, on a Tuesday like this one, and not being anyone's mother at all. Because there was a June morning, 1 year before this one, when a man I used to be married to leaned toward me in a courtroom decorated with balloons and whispered, so softly that the photographer he had hired could not hear it, "You weren't here, so I found him a real mother." There was a pen already uncapped over a form, and the form said that I had given my son away. But let me back up a little. I had been gone for 9 months. The last stretch of it was the hardest because it was the part where I could not write home. I am an officer in the United States Air Force, and my work is the kind that comes with a communications blackout when the rotation calls for it, and this rotation called for it. From the middle of February to the end of April of 2025, I was 4,000 miles from my son, and I could not send him a single word. I wrote to him anyway. I wrote letters I could not mail and folded them into a book I carried, 41 of them by the time I came home, one for almost every night because writing them was the only way I could put him to bed from that far away. People think the hardest part of being deployed is the danger. It is not. The hardest part is the arithmetic. You lie in a cot and you do the math of everything you are missing. A lost tooth, a first two-wheeled bicycle, a school play where a 7-year-old plays a talking tree and forgets one of his 3 lines and says it anyway, 2 beats late, to a gym full of parents who are not you. I missed his 7th birthday by 6 days. I have the photographs now, the ones Winnie took, a cake shaped like a rocket and 8 candles for good luck. And in every single one of them, there is a small empty chair beside him. Because Winnie, bless her, had set a place for me and told him his mom was there in spirit. He is looking at the empty chair in 2 of the pictures. I have never let him see that I noticed. Some things you carry so your child never has to. I told myself, on the flight home, that all of that was behind me. 22 hours of planes and layovers and a duffel that weighed as much as a person. And the whole way, I rehearsed the ordinary future I thought I was flying back into. Enrolling him in the fall soccer he had asked about in a letter I did not receive until I had already landed. Learning the names of his new friends. Being, at last, a mother who was simply present in the room, boring and available in there. I did not know I was flying home into a fight. I thought the hard part was over. The hard part had not started yet. I came home in the middle of May. They let the families onto the flight line, which they do not always do, and I stood there in my flight suit, with my heart going like a bird against a window, and I watched the crowd for a small boy with a cowlick, and then I saw him. He was holding the hand of my neighbor, Winnie Colson, who is 68 and has watched Cole since he was in diapers, and for one terrible second, he did not run. He looked at me the way children look at a person they have been told about, but are not sure they remember. 9 months is a long time when you are 7. It is a fifth of the life you can recall. And then something in him decided, all at once, that I was safe, and he let go of Winnie's hand and ran the last 10 feet and hit me so hard I sat down on the tarmac with him in my arms. And he said into my neck, "You got skinny!" And I laughed until I was crying, which is a thing your body can do when it has been holding still for 9 months. I did not notice the wrongness that first day. I was too full. That first night, he wanted to show me his room, and I let him lead me by 2 fingers down the hall the way he had when he was small. Someone had rearranged it. There was a new lamp, a new comforter with rockets on it, things a person buys for a child they are trying to win. And I told myself that kindness to my son was not a crime, and I meant it, and it still sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. On the wall by his bed, he had taped a drawing. 4 figures in crayon, holding hands, the way children draw families. A tall one he had labeled Dad, a small one with a cowlick he had labeled me, a dog we do not own, and a woman with yellow hair, and under her, in the careful, oversized letters of a boy learning to write, the word Mom. I stood in the doorway and I looked at that drawing for what felt like a long time, and Cole, who misses nothing, said, "Larissa helped me spell it." And then, worried he had done something wrong, "Is that okay?" "That's a really good drawing," I said, because he was 7 and none of this was his to carry. "You spelled it perfectly?" And I turned off his rocket lamp and I went and stood in the kitchen with the lights off for a while. The mail was the other thing. There was a basket of it on the counter, and when I looked through it, a great deal of it had been forwarded, rerouted to a post office box I did not recognize, and only some of it had trickled back. Bank things, a jury notice, and near the bottom, an envelope from a family law office, addressed to me, opened, then taped shut again, as if someone had read my mail and thought better of leaving it lying open. I did not know yet what any of it meant. I only knew the feeling, the cold voice feeling, that a story had been running in my house for months while I was too far away to be a character in it. I noticed it the second day, on Winnie's porch. She had made the kind of coffee she makes, which is too strong, and served in a cup with a faded rooster on it, and she waited until Cole was inside watching cartoons, and then she put her hand flat on the little table between us, the way you put your hand down when you are about to say a thing you have decided you have to say. "Addie," she said, "before you hear it from somebody who is proud of it, there have been lawyers at the house." "Whose house?" I said, though I already knew. "Nolan's. Nolan and that woman. Cars I didn't know. A man with a briefcase, twice." She turned the rooster cup a quarter turn on its saucer. "And Cole, honey? Cole has been calling her mother, Larissa's mother. He calls her Grandma. I didn't correct him. It wasn't my place. But it wasn't right, and I've been sick over it. There is a voice that wants to stand up off a porch and drive across town and put its fist through a door. I know that voice well. I have known it since I was young. But there is another voice, the one the Air Force spent 13 years training into me. And that voice is quieter, and it is colder, and it is the one that keeps you alive. That voice said, 'Sit down, drink the coffee, say thank you to the woman who is on your side. Then go home and open every drawer and every envelope, and find out what was done and write it all down before you say one word to anyone who might hide it.' So I thanked Winnie. I finished the coffee. I told myself that paperwork was just paperwork. I was wrong about which paperwork. I learned the date the way you learn the worst things, which is by accident from a child. It was a Thursday. Cole came off the bus with his backpack unzipped, the way it always is, and he was rooting through it for a permission slip, and he pulled out a folded piece of cardstock and handed it to me because it had a picture of balloons on it, and he thought it was for a birthday. "It's a special day," he said. "Dad said, there's going to be cake at the courthouse." That's weird, huh? Cake at a courthouse. I unfolded it. It was an invitation, printed on nice paper, the kind you order, not the kind you make. It said, in a friendly typeface, that the family and friends of Cole were invited to celebrate the finalization of his adoption. It gave a date, 2 days out, a Tuesday, at 10 in the morning. It gave the name of a family court, and down at the bottom, in a smaller and warmer font, it said, "A boy deserves a mom who stays." I read it 4 times. The kitchen went very far away. An adoption. To finalize an adoption of a child who already has a mother, a court first has to end that mother's rights. You cannot adopt a boy who is spoken for. Somewhere there was a document with my name on it, agreeing to become a stranger to my own son, and I had never seen it. I had been in a tent with no way to send a birthday card, and while I was there, someone had made me sign away the birthday boy. I did not scream. I want that on the record because in the weeks that came after, people kept expecting me to have screamed, and I did not. I put the invitation flat on the counter and I smoothed it with my hand, the way you smooth a thing you are going to need to show a judge. Then I made Cole a snack, and I helped him with the part of his homework that was about telling time, the little clock with the movable hands, and I put him to bed, and I read him 1 chapter, and I turned off his light. And then I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer whose name Winnie had given me, a civilian family attorney named Patrice Langford, and I got her answering service, and I left a message that I am sure sounded very calm and very strange. The second call was to the base, to legal assistance. Because whatever this was, it had been done to a service member while she was serving, and I had a feeling, the cold voice feeling, that this was not only a family matter, that there were rules that existed exactly for this, written by people who had seen exactly this. A duty attorney called me back at 6:15 the next morning. Her name was Captain Lena Fairweather, and she listened to me lay it out in the flat, sequenced way you learn to brief things. And when I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said a sentence I have not forgotten. "Major, I want to make sure I have this right. You were on orders in a blackout on the date they say you consented?" "Yes." "Then they did not get a signature from you," she said. "They manufactured one. Those are different things, and courts care a great deal about the difference. Can you be at that courthouse Tuesday? Not to make a scene, to be present. Presence is a legal fact all by itself." I said I could be at that courthouse Tuesday. I did not sleep. I laid out my service dress on the back of the door, the dark blue coat, the silver and blue of my rank on the shoulders, the ribbons squared away, and I looked at it for a long time in the light from the hall. I was not going to war. I was going to a room with balloons in it. But I understood, in a way I could not have explained, that I needed to walk in wearing the truth of who I actually am, because the whole plan had depended on my not being there to be anyone at all. The courtroom was decorated for a celebration. I have thought about that a great deal since. There is a special cruelty in decorations. A bare courtroom would have felt like a fight. But they had put up balloons, silver and pale green, tied to the backs of the gallery benches. There was a folding table along one wall with a sheet cake on it under a plastic dome, and I could see, even from the doorway, that the cake had writing on it, and I made myself not read the writing. Cole was there in a little gray suit that I had never seen, with a clip-on tie, sitting in the front row between his father and a woman I knew from photographs was named Larissa Dunmore. A photographer in a vest crouched in the aisle, changing a lens. The gallery was half full. I recognized some of it and not the rest. A few of Nolan's cousins, dressed up, whispering. A row of people who I guessed were Larissa's family, an older couple holding hands. The woman my son had been taught to call Grandma. What I did not see, and what I noticed that I did not see, was Nolan's own mother. Marta was not there. I filed that away without knowing yet what it meant. The way you file everything when the cold voice is driving. The cake under its plastic dome had a ribbon of green icing around the base, and in the center it said, in a looping script, "Welcome to your forever family." And I had promised myself I would not read it. And I read it, and something in me went very quiet and very steady, the way the air goes before weather. Nobody saw me at first. I stood at the back in my service dress, and I let myself look at all of it before it started. The way you take a picture in your mind of a place you are never going to want to remember but always will. Nolan looked good. He always looked good. He had the kind of face that people trust in about 4 seconds, which is a dangerous face to be married to, and a worse one to divorce. Larissa was younger than me by a few years, and she was pretty in a nervous way, and I remember thinking, with the last of my anger before something else replaced it, that she looked like a woman at her own wedding who has just realized she has left the iron on at home. The lawyer was the one who saw me, a heavy, silver-haired man in a good suit, sitting at the petitioner's table with a neat stack of folders. His name was Wade Sorensen. He saw me in the doorway, and his face did a small thing, a tightening, and he leaned and said something to Nolan, and Nolan turned around. "I will give him this." He did not flinch. He stood up, and he came halfway up the aisle to me, smiling the 4-second smile, and he put his hand on my arm as if we were two old friends who had once shared a life, which I suppose we were, and he leaned in close enough that the photographer could not hear, close enough that the judge's clerk arranging papers at the bench could not hear, and he said it. "You weren't here," he said softly, almost kindly. So I found him a real mother. Our son was 7. He was sitting 15 feet away in a suit I had never bought, swinging his feet because they did not reach the floor. "The file says I signed in March," I said. I kept my voice as level as the cold voice wanted it. "Nolan, in March I was 4,000 miles away. Nobody on Earth could reach me, you know that." Something moved behind his eyes, fast, there and gone. "You always have a story," he said, and the kindness was gone now, and he turned and walked back to the front, and he sat down next to our son and put an arm around him. I looked at Larissa then, and this is the part I got wrong, and I am going to tell it the way it happened rather than the way that makes me look good. I looked at her, and I hated her. I thought she was the architect. I thought she was the woman who had decided that my son needed replacing and had gone out and had it done. She felt me looking, and she turned, and for 1 second our eyes met. And then she looked down at her own hands in her lap, and she would not look up again. And I read that as guilt. I know now it was shame, and they are cousins, but they are not the same, and I spent 6 weeks not knowing the difference. The clerk called the matter. Judge Cornelius Pratt came in, an older man with reading glasses down his nose, and everybody stood, and I stayed standing at the back where I was. Sorensen rose and began, smooth as water, about a loving home and a devoted stepmother-to-be, and a biological mother who had, quote, chosen a different path, and he slid a document across to the clerk to hand up to the bench, and the photographer lifted his camera, and Larissa reached over and took Cole's hand, and everyone in that room believed they were at a beginning. Then the doors opened behind me, and the officer I had called that morning stepped inside. She was in service dress, too, dark blue and squared away, and she walked up the center aisle at the unhurried pace of a person who has read the room and knows she owns the next 90 seconds of it, and she stopped at the bar and said, Your Honor, my apologies for the interruption. Captain Lena Fairweather, Air Force Legal Assistance. I represent the interests of Major Adeline Rourke, who is present, and I ask the court's leave to be heard for 2 minutes before any order is signed. Judge Pratt looked at her over the reading glasses. He looked at me at the back of his courtroom in my uniform. He set down his pen, which had been in his hand. This is a finalization hearing, Captain, he said. It is somewhat late for an appearance. It is, Your Honor, and I would not interrupt a finalization for anything less than what I am about to say. She did not raise her voice. She did not point at anyone. She had one sheet of paper in her hand, and she held it the way you hold a thing you do not need to wave because it is going to do the work by itself. This petition asked the court to terminate Major Rourke's parental rights based on a written consent. That consent is dated the 14th of March, 2025, and bears her signature and a notary seal. On the 14th of March, 2025, Major Rourke was on active federal service on a classified rotation 4,000 miles from this county under a communications blackout that made it impossible for her to sign, mail, or notarize anything at all. She could not have signed this. She did not sign this, and she is standing in your courtroom to say so in person. The room did a thing that rooms do. It got very still, and then it got quieter than still, which is a different thing, a held breath thing. Sorensen was up fast. Your Honor, this is theatrical. We have a notarized instrument. A notary's seal is presumptive. Counsel is welcome to file something, but there is a family here today, a child, and I would ask that we not— Mr. Sorensen! Judge Pratt did not raise his voice either. He had the kind of quiet that comes from 30 years of being the quietest person who is also completely in charge. A notary's seal is presumptive of regularity. It is not presumptive of time travel. He looked at the document in front of him for a long moment. Then he capped his pen and set it down flat, and he laid his hand over it, and I understood that the pen was not going to move today. I'm not signing anything this morning. This matter is continued. I am ordering the original instrument and the notary's journal and the full file preserved and lodged with the clerk. Nobody is to alter, refile, or supplement anything until I have had a hearing on the question Captain Fairweather has just raised. Do we understand each other? Yes, Your Honor, Sorensen said, and for the first time his voice had a hair in it. I want to be honest about what that moment was and was not. Captain Fairweather had not proven who forged the consent. She had not proven Nolan did anything. She had proven one small, unkillable fact, that a signature existed on a date on which the person could not have signed. That is all. But a fact like that is a stone in a shoe. You cannot walk on it? And I stood at the back of that courtroom, and for the first time in 9 months, I watched somebody else go pale instead of me. Sorensen was already gathering his folders, squaring them with both hands. The busy motion of a man who needs his hands to be doing something so that his face does not have to answer for anything. Nolan had not moved. He sat very still, staring at the empty place on the bench where the pen had been about to come down, and I watched him understand, in real time, that the one variable his entire plan had depended on, my absence, had walked in the door in a dark blue coat and could not be sent back overseas. He turned his head, once, and found me at the back, and there was no smile now, none. And I did not smile either. We just looked at each other across a courtroom decorated with balloons, two people who had once promised each other a life, And I think that was the moment we both knew exactly how it was going to end. Cole did not understand any of it. He turned around in his seat looking for the source of all the grown-up quiet, and he found me at the back, in my uniform, and his whole face opened up, and he said, much too loud, into the silence of a stopped courtroom, "Mom, you came." I said, "I came, buddy. I'm right here." And that, more than the law, is the moment the plan died. Because everyone in that room heard a 7-year-old call me the name they were there to take away. Outside on the courthouse steps, Captain Fairweather put her cover on against the sun and gave me the shape of the fight. "Today bought you time and nothing else," she said. "Understand that. I stopped a pen. I did not win a case. Here is how this works. The base can protect your record, and I can keep your rights from being terminated in your absence. That is squarely legal assistance, and I will do it. But the adoption itself lives in civilian family court, and I cannot represent you there. You need a civilian family lawyer, and you need a good one, because the other side has one who charges a great deal and is not, whatever else he is, a fool." "I called one last night," I said. "Patrice Langford." Fairweather's mouth did something that was almost a smile. "Then you called the right one. Langford eats men like Sorensen with a spoon." She turned to face me square. "Major, may I tell you the thing I tell everybody, whether they want it or not?" "Please." "You are going to want to win this by proving he is a monster," she said. "Do not. Juries and judges get tired of monsters. Win it by proving the calendar. The calendar cannot be cross-examined. The calendar does not get flustered on the stand. You were somewhere on the 14th of March, and it was not a notary's office in this county, and every hour you can nail down is a nail in this. Build the calendar. Let him be the monster on his own time." I met with Patrice Langford the next afternoon, in an office with too many books and a window that looked at a parking lot, and I liked her within the first minute, which is not a thing that happens to me. She was somewhere in her 40s, small, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and a way of listening where she wrote nothing down until you were completely finished, and then wrote everything down at once. "Tell me about the marriage," she said. "Only the parts that touch the paper. I do not need to know if he was kind. I need to know when you signed things together, because whoever built this signature built it from a real one. Somewhere there is a genuine Adeline Rourke signature that this was traced from. Marriage license, mortgage, a car. Find me the well he drew from." "The marriage license," I said slowly. 2015. I remember signing it. He teased me because I did the little loop on the A too big. She wrote that down. She underlined it. Then she asked the question I had not let myself ask. "Do you have a way to prove where you were on the 14th of March? Not a story. Proof." "My commander can," I said. "Lieutenant Colonel Sandoval. The rotation was logged. The blackout window is documented. She can put the dates in front of a judge." I called Lieutenant Colonel Neve Sandoval that evening, and she did not waste words, which is one of the reasons I have followed her from posting to posting for 6 years. I told her what had been done. There was a silence on the line, and then she said, in a voice with a great deal held down under it, "They used your service against you. They bet that the thing that took you away from him would be the thing that let them take him from you." Another silence. "I can put the dates in front of a judge under seal. The classified specifics stay classified. But the fact of the window, the fact that you were unreachable and where the theater was in the general sense, I can certify that. I cannot put your marriage back together, Rourke. Fight the part I can help with." There was a harder education waiting for me at home that week, and it was in my own son. It came out sideways, the way things come out of children at bedtime, when the lights are off and the day has loosened its grip on them. I was reading him a chapter, and he stopped me with a hand flat on the page, and he said, "Are you going to be at my special day?" I put the book down. "Tell me about the special day." "Dad says it's the day I get to make my family official," he said, carefully, reciting, and I could hear that the words were not his, that they had been handed to him. "He says everybody who loves me will be there, and Larissa is going to be my mom now, the everyday one, and you can be my other mom, the faraway one, and that way I get two." He looked up at me, anxious, checking my face for whether he had said it right. "That's good, right? 2 is more than 1. I have been calm under pressure. I have briefed colonels with my voice flat while things were going wrong in 3 time zones. It took everything those 13 years had put into me not to let my face do what it wanted to do. 2 people can love you," I said slowly. "As many people as want to can love you. That is always true, and it is always good. But nobody gets made your mom on a piece of paper, buddy, because you already have one, and she is not far away anymore. She is right here, and she is not going anywhere ever again. He thought about that with the seriousness of a boy turning over a hard thing. But Dad said, I know Dad said, grown-ups are working some things out right now. That is grown-up work, and it is not one single bit your job. I smoothed the rocket comforter over him. Your only job is to be 7. Can you do that job for me? I'm good at that job, he said, and I told him he was the best there ever was. And I read him the rest of the chapter in a steady voice. And when he was asleep, I sat on the floor of his room with my back against his bed for a long time in the dark. That was the night it stopped being only about the paper. A forged form is a crime against a court. Teaching a 7-year-old to hand his own mother the word far away is a crime against a child. I decided, on that floor, that I would not scream, and I would not break where he could see it, because he could not be allowed to feel that any of this had cost me anything. He was going to grow up certain that his mother was steady. That was the one thing they were not going to take, no matter what the paper said. That night, I stopped asking why he had done it. Why is a bottomless well, and I had a boy to raise? I started asking how he had done it, because how has edges, how can be pulled apart, how leaves fingerprints. We found the first fingerprint 11 days later, and it was the notary. Patrice pulled the state's notary commission registry, which is a public thing that almost nobody thinks to look at, and she ran the seal from the consent form. The notary who had stamped my forged signature was a woman named Trina Halcomb, and Trina Halcomb's notary commission had expired in the autumn of 2023. Look at this, Patrice said, and turned her monitor toward me and tapped the screen with a pen. The seal is dated the 14th of March, 2025. Her commission died in October of 2023. That seal was 2 years dead when it kissed the paper. You cannot notarize with a commission that does not exist any more than you can cash a check on a closed account. Who is she? I said. Patrice smiled without any warmth at all. That is the beautiful part. Trina Halcomb is a paralegal. She works for Wade Sorensen. I sat with that. The lawyer who had stood up in a decorated courtroom and lectured a judge about the presumptive weight of a notary seal had used his own paralegal with a lapsed commission to stamp a document he then carried into court. It was not the work of a careful man. It was the work of a confident one. He had been confident because the one person who could contradict any of it was, by design, on the far side of the planet and unable to answer a phone. The second fingerprint was the signature itself, and for that we needed a man named Gregory Aldis. Aldis is a forensic document examiner, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who wore a bow tie without irony and treated handwriting the way a jeweler treats stones. Patrice sent him the consent form and a certified copy of my 2015 marriage license. And a week later, the three of us sat in his office while he put the 2 signatures up side by side on a large screen, enormous, every stroke a canyon. People believe they sign their name the same way every time, Aldis said. They do not. A genuine signature is a performance. It varies. The pressure changes, the speed changes, the little connecting strokes wander. That variation is the signature of the signature, if you will. It is how we know a hand is alive. He pointed at the 2 enlarged names with a laser dot. Watch the loop on the capital A. In the 2015 license, it is a little too big, a youthful flourish, and in the 2025 consent. The dot moved. It is a little too big, in exactly the same place, to exactly the same degree, the same wander in the same connecting stroke, the same lift at the same point. He turned to us. People do not sign their name the same way twice. This name was signed the same way twice. Once in 2015, by a bride. Once on a form you tell me you never touched. One of these signatures is a tracing of the other. In my opinion, to a reasonable degree of professional certainty, the consent signature is a tracing of the license signature. There was almost a joy in hearing it, and then a sickness right behind the joy, because it meant that somewhere in a house I used to live in, someone had laid my forged relinquishment over my own wedding paperwork and copied the girl I had been signing her new married name, and had used the happiest signature of my life to erase the most important fact of it. By then I had built the binder. Captain Fairweather had told me to build the calendar, and I had taken her at her exact word. I had my orders. I had the flight manifests in the parts that were not classified. I had the family readiness records that logged the blackout window. I had the 41 letters I had written and could not send. Each one dated in my own hand, a diary no one could have forged because no one had known it existed. I had bank records showing not one single transaction anywhere near this county in February, March, or April. I laid it all out on my dining table in tabbed sections, and I photographed every page, and I kept a duplicate copy at Winnie's house in case anything happened to mine, because the cold voice does not trust a single point of failure. When Patrice first opened it, she went quiet, and then she said, "Most clients bring me feelings. You brought me a case." It was the kindest thing anyone said to me that whole year. We had a near miss in that same stretch, and it told us more than a clean win would have. Patrice got a call one afternoon from a clerk she had known for 20 years, a courtesy, entirely off the record. I was sitting in her office when it came, and I watched her face go still and then satisfied, which is a strange pair of things to watch happen to a face at the same time. She hung up and looked at me. "They just tried to file a second consent," she said. "A new one. Cleaner, properly notarized this time, by a real notary with a live commission, freshly signed, as if the first one had never existed." She took off her glasses. "Do you understand what that tells us? You do not rush out to replace a document that was fine to begin with. An innocent man does not quietly swap the evidence in the middle of the night. Judge Pratt's preservation order caught it at the window and bounced it right back. And now the attempt to replace the forgery is itself a second act of the same fraud." "Is a second forgery good for us or bad for us?" I said. "For us," she said, and she almost smiled. "It is very good for us. It means he cannot help himself. Confident men keep reaching for the same handle. Every door I have opened in this case has had his fingerprints on the inside of the knob." The proof stacked up on paper, but the case turned on a person, and the person was the one I had gotten wrong. Larissa Dunmore was subpoenaed to give a deposition, and the afternoon before it, she called Patrice's office and asked, in a small voice, if she could come in early and talk. Patrice, who trusts no one on principle, told her to come and told me to be there and told me to say nothing and let her run it. So I sat in the corner of that book-filled office, and I watched the woman I had decided to hate walk in, looking like she had not slept in a month. She had a folder held against her chest with both arms, the way a child holds a school book. She sat down across from Patrice, and she looked at me once, quickly, and then she looked at the floor, and she started to talk before anyone asked her anything. "I need to tell you what he told me," she said, "because I think you believe I did this, and I understand why you would believe that. But I need you to know what I knew, and when I knew it." Patrice said gently, "Take your time." "He told me you were gone," Larissa said. "Not deployed. Gone. He said you had signed papers months ago, that you had agreed to it, that you had a new posting and a new life, and that you had stopped answering, that you did not call Cole, that you had, he used this word, that you had moved on. He said Cole cried at night because his mother did not want him. He said the kindest thing anyone could do for that little boy was to give him a mother who would stay." Her voice broke on the word stay, and she pressed the folder harder against herself. "And I fell in love with that boy. That part was not a lie. I did not want to replace you. I did not know you were a person who was going to walk through a door. I thought you were a signature on a form and a woman who did not answer. He handed me a story where I got to be the good one." She finally looked up at me, and her eyes were terrible. "And I believed a man I was about to marry. I am so sorry. I am so far past sorry." She set the folder on the desk and slid it across. Inside were text messages she had printed, months of them, in which Nolan told her over and over, in writing, that I had abandoned my son, that I had signed, that I would not answer. Lies with dates on them. And near the end, one to her that made even Patrice go quiet, where Larissa had asked, in April, why they could not simply wait until I was back to do it all cleanly and with my blessing, and Nolan had answered, "There is no blessing coming. Trust the process I set up. It is handled." I had spent 6 weeks certain that woman was the villain. She was just the last one he fooled. I did not say most of what I felt. What I said was, "Thank you for coming in. That took more than most people have." She shook her head. "It is the least. It is so much less than the least." And then she said the thing that told me she was going to be all right someday, and that she was not a bad person who had done a bad thing, but a good person who had been handed a poisoned story. She said, "What do you need from me? I will say all of it, under oath, to a judge, to anyone. I do not care what it costs me with him. He used me to hurt a child. There is no marriage after that." While all of this was happening, the paper caught up too. Lieutenant Colonel Sandoval's declaration was filed under seal. The certified fact of the blackout window, the theater in general terms, the impossibility of my having signed anything on the 14th of March. And the court appointed a guardian ad litem for Cole, a brisk and kind woman named Delphine Marsh, whose only client was the boy, and whose report, after she spent time with him, said two things that mattered: that Cole was deeply and securely bonded to his mother, and that he had been coached, gently but unmistakably, to describe a woman he had known for 1 year as his mother, and that the coaching had confused and upset him in ways a 7-year-old cannot name. I had met Delphine Marsh in my own living room on a Saturday, while Cole built a fort out of couch cushions 10 feet away. She was a brisk woman with kind eyes and a canvas bag full of legal pads, and she made it clear in the first minute that she did not work for me and did not work for Nolan and did not work for the court. "I have exactly one client," she said, nodding toward the cushion fort, "and he is 4 feet tall and currently defending a castle. Everything I do for him, which means I am going to ask you some questions you will not enjoy," she asked them. Whether I had ever intended to give him up, whether I had let contact lapse, whether the deployments were a choice to be away from him or a duty that took me from him, and whether I understood that the difference matters to a child, even on the days it does not matter to a court. I answered all of it plainly. I did not perform. Fairweather had taught me that a judge can smell a performance from across a building. Then Marsh spent an hour with Cole in his fort, and I made myself stay in the kitchen and not listen, and when she came out, her face had changed. She sat back down across from me and chose her words with care. "He is bonded to you," she said. "Securely, the textbook way, the way you cannot fake and cannot coach. That part is a relief." She paused. "But someone has been teaching him language. He used the phrase 'far away, Mom' 3 separate times, unprompted, and every time he watched my face to see if he had gotten it right. A 7-year-old should not be auditioning for the adults in his life. I am going to say exactly that, in writing, to the judge." She put her pads away. "For whatever it is worth, and I am not supposed to say things that are worth anything to a parent. He is a well-loved boy who is confused. Confused I can work with. Well-loved is the whole ballgame." The case had started as my word against his. It had become his own handwriting against the calendar with a witness he had made himself. The hearing on the motion to vacate was in the middle of September, in the same courtroom, and this time there were no balloons. I wore the service dress again. Cole was not there. We had all agreed. The one thing everyone in the case agreed on, that a courtroom was no place for him that day. He was with Winnie, building something out of blocks, and I had told him only that I had some grown-up paperwork to finish so that he and I could stop having to talk to lawyers. And he had said, "Good, they're boring," and gone back to his blocks, and that was the mercy of being 7. Patrice did not raise her voice once the entire morning. She did not need to. She had built a staircase, and all she had to do was walk down it. She put up the 2 signatures and let Gregory Aldous explain the loop on the capital A, the 2 big flourish that appeared, impossibly, in 2 places 10 years apart. Sorensen rose to cross-examine him because it was his job, and it was the only real fight of the morning, and it lasted about 90 seconds. He asked whether handwriting comparison was not, in the end, subjective. Aldous folded his hands on the rail. "Comparison has a subjective component, counselor. So does a radiologist reading a film. That is why we look for features that do not occur by chance. A person reproducing the exact same aberration in the exact same connecting stroke to the same degree is not chance. It is tracing. I have testified to that in this state for 22 years, and I would testify to it about your own signature if someone traced it." Sorensen sat down. He did not ask a second question. You do not ask a second question when the first one turns over in your hand. She put up the notary registry and let it say, in the state's own records, that Trina Halcombe's commission had been dead for 2 years on the day it supposedly witnessed my hand. She read Lieutenant Colonel Sandoval's sealed declaration in the parts that could be read aloud, the certified fact that on the 14th of March I had been unreachable and far away. Then she called Larissa Dunmore, and the room got a different kind of quiet because everyone could see what it cost her. She had been going to marry the man at the other table, and now she raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth about him. Patrice asked her what Nolan had told her about me. She said, in a clear voice that only shook once, "He told me she had abandoned Cole. He told me she signed papers agreeing to it months ago. He told me she had stopped answering and did not want to be his mother anymore." Patrice asked whether any of that had been true. Larissa looked for the first time all morning directly at Nolan, and she said, "No, none of it. I found that out the day an Air Force officer walked into a courtroom looking for her son." And then she looked away from him, and she did not look back, and I understood that whatever he had been to her had ended inside that one sentence. And then, at the end, Patrice did the thing that Captain Fairweather had told me not to count on, and that turned out to matter anyway. She read one of his own text messages aloud. It had come out of Larissa's phone, sent by Nolan to Wade Sorensen in February, a month before the forged date, And it was the whole scheme in 2 sentences. Patrice held the page the way Fairweather had held hers on that first morning without waving it, and she read it in a flat and unhurried voice. Quote, she said, "She is dark until summer. Nobody signs for a deployed officer but us." End quote. The courtroom went to that held breath quiet again. Judge Pratt took off his reading glasses. Nolan looked at the table in front of him and did not look up, and I watched the 4-second smile fail him at last, watched it not come, and I felt no triumph, only a kind of terrible tiredness, because he had written it down. They always write it down. Sorensen tried at the end because it was his job to try. He talked about a devoted father and the best interests of a child and a stepmother who loved the boy. And Judge Pratt listened because he was a patient man. And then he put his glasses back on and delivered a ruling that I have read the transcript of more times than I will admit. He found that the consent to terminate my parental rights was a forgery. He found that it had been notarized under a commission that had expired by an employee of Petitioner's Counsel. He found that the petitioner had made a knowing misrepresentation to the court. He vacated the pending adoption in its entirety. He restored my parental rights, which he noted had never lawfully been in question. He ordered that primary physical residence of Cole be with me, with structured and, for a period, supervised time for his father. He referred Wade Sorensen to the state bar. He referred the forgery and the false notarization to the district attorney. And then he looked at Nolan over the glasses for a long moment, and he said only, "Sir, you weaponized this country's respect for the people who serve it against one of the people who serve it. I will let the district attorney find the word for that. I have run out of my own." When it was my turn to say something, and Patrice had told me I might get the chance, I stood, and I did not say any of the cutting things I had rehearsed at 2 a.m. across those long weeks. I said, "This was never about winning. It was about being allowed to stay his mother." And I sat down. I did not feel like a winner walking out. I felt like a person who had been holding a door shut against a storm for months with her whole body and had just felt the latch finally catch on its own, so that for the first time she could take her hands away and find out they still worked. The apology came a month later in a coffee shop, and it did not come from the person you would expect. Larissa asked to meet me. She was not in trouble. The district attorney had made clear early that she was a witness, not a target, that she had been deceived as thoroughly as anyone. She sat across a small table from me and turned a paper cup in her hands the way Winnie turns the rooster cup, and she said, "I do not expect to be in your life. I do not expect you to want me anywhere near Cole. I wanted you to hear this from me and not from a lawyer or a court. I am sorry. I helped hurt your son, and I helped try to erase you, and it does not matter that I did not know because I should have asked more, and I did not ask more because the story he gave me let me have something I wanted. That is on me forever." I looked at her for a while. I had been so sure for 6 weeks that I would enjoy this moment, that I would get to be cold to the woman who tried to take my child. And I discovered sitting there that I did not have it in me because it would have been a lie. She was not that woman. She had never been that woman. She had been a story he told. "I was wrong about you," I said. It was hard to say, and I made myself say all of it. In that courtroom, in June, I looked at you and I decided you were the one who did this. I built you into the villain because I needed a face for it, and yours was closest. I was wrong. You were the last person he lied to before he lied to a judge. I am not going to pretend we are going to be friends, but I am not going to let you carry a part that was his. I set down my own cup. We will not be close. But if Cole ever asks about the year the grown-ups were strange, I am not going to teach him to hate you. He has enough to sort out about his father. He does not need a second name to be afraid of. She cried a little quietly, the way you cry when someone gives you less punishment than you came prepared to take. And then she thanked me, and we did not become friends. And that was right. And we also did not become enemies. And that was righter. The harder grace was about Nolan, and it was not a coffee shop, and it was not clean. His mother, Marta, came to the house once, near the very end of all of it. She stood on my porch in a good coat she had clearly put on for the occasion, an old woman with her son's exact eyes. And she could not look at me. Her hands were shaking, and she gripped her own purse to still them. "I did not know what he had done," she said. "I want you to believe that. When I found out there was going to be a hearing, I could not make myself go and sit behind him. That is why I was not in that courtroom in June. I could not put my body in a room to support what he did to you and to that boy." She stopped. Her chin was trembling. "I raised him better than this. I have asked myself every night what I did wrong, and I do not have an answer, and I am too old to get one now." I believed her. It is a strange thing to look at the mother of the man who tried to erase you and feel no anger at all, only a kind of shared grief. Two women standing on a porch, mourning the same person for opposite reasons. I believe you, I told her, and I watched some of the weight come off her shoulders when I said it. She asked me then, in a whisper, the thing she had come to ask, and I could see it had taken all her courage to get to my door. Will I be allowed to know him still? Cole? Will I be allowed to be his grandmother? She rushed on, as if to spare me the trouble of refusing. I will understand if the answer is no. After what my son did, I would understand a no. A boy should not lose a grandmother for his father's sins, I said. You did not forge anything. You will always be his grandmother. We will work out the how of it together. But the answer is yes. And she wept on my porch, the way old women weep, almost without any sound at all, one hand pressed over her mouth. And I stood there with her until she was finished, because grief does not much care whose side you are on. And when it came to the visitation, when Patrice laid out the options and the court would have let me push for the maximum restriction, supervised, brief, cold, I did not push for all of it. I chose short, supervised visits, structured, safe, with the door open to more if he did the work and showed the change, which I did not expect but would not foreclose. Patrice looked at me over her glasses and asked if I was sure, and I said I was. Because here is the thing I had learned. Holding that door shut for all those months, my son still drew his father pictures. He still, some nights, asked when he would see Dad, in the uncomplicated way of a child who does not yet know the whole shape of what happened and should not, for years yet, have to. I was not going to be the one to take a father from a boy who still wanted one. Nolan had tried to erase me. If I erased him back, the only person standing in the ashes would be Cole. Forgiveness, I decided, was not letting him back in. It was refusing to let him turn me into someone who would do to a child what he had done. I was not doing it for Nolan. I have no soft feeling left for Nolan. I was doing it for the boy who still drew him pictures. Which brings me back to the kitchen. It is a Tuesday in the spring of 2026, and the light is low and yellow, and my son is eating his cereal too fast, telling me about a boy who can fold his tongue into a clover. The court order is on the refrigerator under a yellow magnet in the shape of the letter C, and most mornings I do not read it because I do not have to. He sleeps down the hall. He goes to a school 6 minutes from a posting I fought to keep so that I would not miss another lost tooth. He is mine, in the eyes of the law, and in the only eyes that were ever going to matter, which are his. The bus is coming. He knows it before I do, the way children do, and he shovels the last of the cereal and grabs the backpack that is never zipped and comes around the table, and I catch him for 1 second, and I kiss the cowlick that will not lie down, and he says, "Mom, gross," which is how a 7-year-old says, "I love you." And he has gone out the door and down the walk with his coat half on. I stand at the window and watch him get on the bus. There was a version of this morning where I was not in it, where a decorated courtroom and a traced signature and a man with a trustworthy face had made me into a stranger my own son would have grown up being told had chosen to leave. It came within one uncapped pen of being real. What stopped it was not a hero walking through a door. It was one small fact that could not be killed. I was somewhere on the 14th of March, and it was not where they said, and a calendar cannot be talked out of the truth. If my story has taught me anything, it is this. There will always be someone willing to decide who you are while you are not in the room, and to write it down on nice paper and put balloons around it. But the truth keeps its own records, where you were, who you loved, what you actually signed, and what you never touched. Hold on to those records, all of them, even the boring ones, even the ones you think no one will ever ask for. One day, the whole of your life may come down to a single date, and whether you can prove where you stood. If this story moved you, or if it made you think of someone who was written out of a room while they were away serving, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. If you have ever had to prove you were still the person you always were, tell me about it in the comments. I read them, and this community, the people who stop to leave a word, are the reason I keep telling these stories. If you want more stories about courage and justice and hope, then subscribe and stay with us, because there is always another one coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. It matters more than you know. The end.